Hi, I'm going to read to you The Fearless Flights of Hazel Ying by Julie Leung. Hazel Ying was born fearless. She was not afraid of wind or water, as the old Cantonese saying goes. Little Hazel was always the first to jump into the swimming pool. She would hit the ball the hardest in handball games. Hazel didn't care about that she was not allowed in certain parts of town or that she had to carry identification on her at all times. She would run foot races against her brothers, pushing her legs to go their fastest. And when Hazel ran out of breath, she would fall back onto a soft patch of grass and turn her face towards the sky. Sometimes, on sunny days, a silver plane would streak across the clouds. She wondered what it might be like to move so fast her feet couldn't touch the ground. It came as no surprise then that the moment she took her first airplane ride, Hazel Ying knew where she belonged. She delighted in the way the plane rumbled down the runway, building speed as the engine roared in her ears. The wheels lifted and the wind buoyed the metal wings up. Hazel looked out the window in wonder. When the plane landed back on the runway like a skipping rock, Hazel stepped out with only the horizon in her eyes. "I will be a pilot," Hazel declared to anyone who would listen. But it's just not ladylike, her mama warned. It was 1932, and less than 1% of pilots were women. But Hazel cared about that least of all. She wanted to do something that no other Chinese-American girl had done. Her mother threw her hands up in the air. "Aya, you're not afraid of anything." Once Hazel had a taste of sky, she couldn't let it go. To pay for flying lessons, Hazel worked as an elevator operator at a department store. It was one of the few jobs Chinese girls were allowed to have. Invisible jobs, Hazel called them, jobs where you were ignored. Every day, in an airless box, she shuttled shoppers from one floor to the next. When she pulled the lever for different floors, she smiled, imagining she was moving a plane's throttle instead. After work, Hazel chased every chance to get into the pilot seat, where she learned to loop the loops, roll like a barrel, and spin in spirals. In under a year, she earned her flying license. But what could she do with it? Americans didn't want to hire the Chinese, and who would hire a Chinese girl pilot? Then in 1941, World War II reached American shores with the bombing of Pearl Harbor. All available male pilots were called to fight overseas. The U.S. military developed a new program to train women to fly on the home front. The Women Air Force Service Pilots, also known as WASPs. Hazel knew this was her chance to become a pilot at last. She signed up right away, becoming the first Chinese-American woman to fly for the U.S. military. Though they were not allowed to fight on the front lines, WASP work could be just as dangerous. Hazel and her fellow WASP tested planes straight off the assembly line. They were the first to fly them before any man did, and often the first to discover manufacturing defects. One day, in the middle of a mission, Hazel's engine cut out mid-flight. The plane shuddered and began to fall. She relied on her training, crash landing in a Kansas field. A farmer nearby mistook her for a Japanese fighter and chased her, ready to fight. Hazel ducked under the wing for safety and shouted that she was an American. She was finally able to convince the farmer. "Well, you sure made a pretty landing," he said begrudgingly. Hazel told the story to her fellow pilots to make them laugh. But her own laughter masked a secret heartache. She wondered, even despite her fearlessness, if she would ever be seen as an American in other people's eyes. When she was in the air, however, none of it mattered. Hazel Ying was one of few women, even among the WASP, qualified to fly pursuit planes, high-powered single-engine fighter jets. As Hazel zoomed across the sky at hundreds of miles per hour, America became a patchwork of colors. Blue mountains melted into green hills and golden plains. Silver rivers split into gray creeks. No one could see her eyes, hair, or skin color when Hazel was thousands of feet above. Up here, people were just tiny specks against a vast land, and inside her cockpit, Hazel felt like a dragon chasing down the sun. She leaned into the wind, pushing her plane to go faster. She looked at the horizon and willed the world to move forward. One afternoon in November 1944, Hazel was helping fly new P-63 planes to Great Falls, Montana. There was a miscommunication from the radio tower, and Hazel's plane collided with another. She died of her injuries 2 days later. Her family and fellow pilots mourned her passing. They wanted to honor a life that was brief, but bold, brave, and bright. Because wasps were considered civilians at the time, Hazel was not given military recognition. The cemetery tried to stop Hazel's family from burying her in the spot they wanted. They did not want to bury Chinese in a whites-only cemetery, not even heroes. But Hazel's family believed in feng shui, the Chinese philosophy that one must be in harmony with one's surroundings. Translated, feng means wind and shui means water. Hazel had never been afraid of either, as the Cantonese saying goes, and Hazel deserves so much better than barriers and boundaries. The family fought the cemetery's rules and wrote a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt in protest. They willed the world to move forward for Hazel, and won. Today, Hazel Ying Li is remembered in a place chosen just for her, on a hillside overlooking gentle river waters where the wind blows gently down a slope and beckons you to chase the sky.